The sun sinks below the horizon in Seine Bight village, casting a golden hues and shimmering reflections over the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. Barbara stood barefoot on the warm sands, her sketchbook in hand, capturing the vivid colors of the Belizean sunset. A Chicago-based artist, Barbara had come to this quiet village in search of inspiration, her heart weary from the bustling city and from a love that had long since grown cold. As she shaded the fiery oranges into soft pinks, a voice interrupted her focus. "You've missed a spot," it teased. Startled, Barbara turned to find a man standing behind her, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief. He had the kind of rugged charm that seemed to belong in a novel. Sun-kissed skin, broad shoulders, and an infectious grin. He pointed to her sketch and then to the horizon. "Right there, that's where the magic happens." "I don't need help, thank you," she replied curtly, clutching her sketchbook tighter. "Maybe not," he said unfazed. "But sometimes a little perspective goes a long way. I'm George, by the way." He extended his hand. Barbara hesitated but finally shook it. Barbara. And so began their unexpected acquaintance, one painted in the hues of paradise. Over the next few days, George's presence became unavoidable. As a local tour guide and part-time taxi driver, he seemed to pop up everywhere, at the morning market, on the beach, even at her favorite cafe. Each encounter chipped away at Barbara's guarded demeanor. George had an undeniable charm, but it was his deep connection to Seine Bight that intrigued her most. Barbara learned that George wasn't just a tour guide, he was the heart of the village. Locals greeted him warmly, often sharing stories of how he had helped organize events or driven sick neighbors to the hospital late at night. George's part-time taxi driving was more than a job. It was his way of keeping the village connected. He spoke of his late grandmother, who had raised him after his parents' passing, teaching him the importance of community and resilience. One evening he invited Barbara to join him on his tour. "You can't paint the soul of this place from the city," he said. Against her better judgment, she agreed. George revealed his love for storytelling, how he would craft tales during his tours to bring the history and culture of Seine Bight to life for visitors. His passion for protecting the village from overdevelopment was not just about preserving the land, but also about safeguarding the spirit of the people who made Seine Bight special. Their connection deepened with every shared laugh, every stolen glance. Yet, just as Barbara began to imagine a future intertwined with George's, an unexpected twist shattered her idyllic escape. One morning, as Barbara walked through the village, she overheard a heated conversation. George stood in the midst of a small crowd, arguing with a developer. The man's voice was loud, his intentions clear. He wanted to buy up the land to build a luxury resort. "This village isn't for sale," George's voice boomed, his passion evident. But as Barbara approached, another voice cut through the tension. "Barbara, care to join us?" It was the developer. To her horror, she recognized him. Mark Crawford, her ex-fiancé. George's eyes darted between them. "You know him?" "It's complicated," she stammered. Mark smirked. "Barbara and I go way back. What a small world, huh? And now, here she is, painting her little pictures while I'm about to transform this place into something extraordinary." "Transform?" George's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You mean destroy?" Barbara's stomach churned. The man who had once promised her the world was now threatening to tear apart the place she had come to love. And George. How could she explain this? That evening, she sought George out, finding him by the shore. His back was to her, his shoulders tense. "George," she began, "I didn't know he would be here. I had no idea." "But you knew him," he said, turning to face her, "and you didn't tell me." "It didn't seem important," she said weakly. "Not important?" His voice rose. "He's trying to destroy everything I care about. And you're just another outsider who doesn't understand." His words cut deep. "That's not fair," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I care about this place, about you." But George turned away, his silence louder than any argument. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Barbara threw herself into her art, pouring her emotions onto the canvas. Her sketches evolved into vibrant paintings, each one capturing the soul of Seine Bight. The laughter of children playing by the shore, the resilience of the fishermen, the breathtaking beauty of the land. Finally, inspiration struck. She decided to hold an exhibition in the village, showcasing her work to raise awareness about the threat posed by the resort. She invited the locals, tourists, and even Mark, hoping to appeal to his long-lost sense of humanity. The night of the exhibition, the community center buzzed with energy. Barbara's paintings hung like windows into the heart of Seine Bight. One piece in particular drew the most attention, a portrait of George, standing proud against the backdrop of the sea. The days that followed were filled with new beginnings. Barbara and George worked side by side, each bringing their unique gifts to the village. Her art became more than a means of expression. It was a voice for the people of Seine Bight. His tours evolved to include stops that showcased her work, a seamless blend of storytelling and visual wonder. But beneath the surface, currents of uncertainty swirled. The connection between Barbara and George deepened, yet they were two people from different worlds. Could love alone bridge the gap between a bustling Chicago art scene and the tranquil shores of Seine Bight? One lazy afternoon, as Barbara sketched on the porch of her rented bungalow, George arrived with a gleam in his eye. "Get dressed," he said with a playful grin. "I've got a surprise." Barbara raised an eyebrow, but couldn't resist his enthusiasm. Moments later, she found herself on George's small fishing boat, the two of them gliding across the crystal-clear waters. The sun was warm on her skin, and the salty breeze carried the faint aroma of hibiscus. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see," he said cryptically. As the boat rounded a rocky outcrop, a secluded lagoon came into view. The water was an otherworldly shade of aquamarine, fringed by lush mangroves. In the center, a small wooden dock bobbed gently, adorned with strings of fairy lights that sparkled in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's ours for the evening," George said. "I thought we could use some time away from everything." He had prepared a picnic with fresh tropical fruit, grilled lobster, and a chilled bottle of wine. They dined as the sun sunk below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. When the stars emerged, George pulled her to her feet and began to hum a soft melody. "Dance with me?" he asked. Barbara laughed, but her heart melted as he took her in his arms. They swayed to the rhythm of the waves, the world beyond the lagoon fading away. The next morning, Barbara found a letter waiting for her at the doorstep of her bungalow. It was from a prominent gallery in Chicago, offering her a solo exhibition of her Seine Bight series. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, one she had dreamed of for years. Her heart sank as she realized what it might mean. Accepting the offer would require her to return to the city, to leave behind the village and George. She clutched the letter to her chest, torn between two worlds. That evening she told George about the offer. His expression was unreadable. "This is everything you've worked for," he said finally. "You have to go." "But what about us?" she asked, her voice trembling. George sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I want you to stay, but I can't ask you to give up your dreams." If this is what you need, I'll understand." Barbara reached for his hand. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," he said, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "But you have to follow your heart, Barbara, even if it takes you away from me." Over the following days, Barbara wrestled with her decision. She spent hours painting, pouring her emotions onto the canvas in an attempt to make sense of her turmoil. Each stroke told a story of love, loss, and the bittersweet beauty of change. George gave her space, though his absence was palpable. The villagers noticed too, their whispers reaching Barbara's ears. "They're meant to be," one woman said. "But life has a way of testing love," another replied. On her final night in Seine Bight, Barbara invited George to her bungalow. The air was thick with anticipation as he arrived, dressed in his usual casual charm. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the room, illuminating the paintings that adorned the walls. "I wanted you to see this," Barbara said, leading him to a new piece. It was a painting of the lagoon where they had shared their magical evening. In the foreground, two figures danced under the stars. "It's beautiful," George said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "It's us," she whispered. "No matter where I go, you'll always be with me." Tears glistened in his eyes as he pulled her into his arms. "You're my paradise, Barbara. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." Barbara stood at the dock the next morning, her suitcase at her feet and the ferry's engine humming in the distance. George had come to see her off, but the weight of unspoken words hung heavily between them. "You're really leaving," he said, his voice low. "I have to," she replied, though her heart ached with every word. "But it's not forever." George nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he reached for her hand instead. Barbara squeezed it, silently begging him to understand. As the ferry pulled away, she kept her eyes on George, his figure growing smaller against the vibrant backdrop of Seine Bight. She didn't realize she was crying until the salty breeze stung her cheeks. The world she had come to love was slipping away, but she promised herself it wasn't goodbye. It was a pause, a chapter waiting to be written. Seine Bight, George threw himself into his community work. Inspired by Barbara's paintings, he organized a cultural festival to celebrate the village's traditions. Locals came together to share food, music, and stories, drawing tourists who were eager to experience the authentic soul of Seine Bight. Yet, beneath his cheerful exterior, George felt her absence like a constant ache. He missed her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she discovered something new, and the quiet moments they had shared under the stars. One evening, as he walked along the beach, he found himself at the lagoon where they had danced. The memory of that night was vivid, but instead of filling him with joy, it left him feeling empty. For the first time, he wondered if he could ever truly be happy without her. Back in Chicago, Barbara's world was a whirlwind of gallery meetings, press interviews, and late nights in her studio. The exhibition was a massive success, with critics praising her work for its raw, heartfelt portrayal of a disappearing paradise. Yet despite the accolades, her heart remained tethered to Seine Bight and to George. Every night she found herself scrolling through the photos she had taken in the village, the fishermen hauling in their nets, children laughing as they chased kites along the beach, George's infectious grin as he guided tourists through the mangroves. She sent him letters, long handwritten pages filled with her thoughts, sketches, and memories. He replied with stories of the village and updates on his work to preserve its heritage. But as weeks turned into months, the distance between them felt like an ocean too vast to cross. Months later, Barbara stood in her Chicago apartment, staring at a package that had just arrived. Inside was a small wooden carving of a mangrove tree, its roots intertwined in a way that made it look almost alive. A note was tucked alongside it. Roots run deep, even across the distance. Missing you always, George. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the carving to her chest. That night she made a decision. The next morning she called her gallery manager. "I need to take some time off," she said firmly. "I've been away from home too long." Barbara arrived in Seine Bight on a warm afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of hibiscus and sea salt. She hadn't told George she was coming, wanting to surprise him. As she walked through the village, familiar faces greeted her with smiles and hugs, their warmth filling the emptiness she hadn't realized was still inside her. She found George at the community center, organizing supplies for the upcoming festival. His back was to her, and for a moment she simply watched him, her heart pounding. "Need some help?" she called out. He froze, then turned slowly, his eyes widening as he saw her. "Barbara," he breathed, his voice filled with disbelief. She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "I couldn't stay away." George closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, pulling her into his arms. For a moment neither of them spoke, their embrace saying everything they couldn't put into words. That evening they sat by the lagoon, the bioluminescence shimmering around them like tiny stars. George held her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles against her skin. "Why did you come back?" he asked softly. "Because you're my home," she replied. "I thought I had to choose between my dreams and you, but I realized I don't. I want to paint here, live here, with you." George's eyes glistened with emotion. "I never stopped hoping you'd come back." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You were right all along. The magic isn't just in the place, it's in the people, the connections. It's in us." The days that followed Barbara's return were filled with laughter, shared plans, and a deeper connection than ever before. George took her to parts of Seine Bight she had never seen. Hidden waterfalls deep in the jungle, ancient Mayan ruins just outside the village, and a small coral cay where time seemed to stand still. With each new adventure, Barbara felt her love for George and for the village grow stronger. Her art flourished in ways she hadn't imagined. Inspired by the vibrant life around her, Barbara began creating a new series of paintings that combined her city-honed techniques with the raw beauty of the Caribbean. George became her biggest cheerleader, often sneaking into her studio to watch her work, offering playful critiques and stolen kisses. One sunny morning, George surprised Barbara with breakfast on the beach. Freshly brewed coffee, warm coconut bread, and sweet mangoes were laid out on a colorful blanket. As they ate, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "What's this?" Barbara asked, taking it from him. "A proposal," he said with a grin. Barbara raised an eyebrow, her heart skipping a beat. "A proposal? Not that kind," he teased, though his eyes hinted at something deeper. "I've been thinking about how we can bring your art and my tours together. What if we create a cultural center here in Seine Bight? A place where people can learn about the village, experience the art, and connect with the community." Barbara's eyes widened as she unfolded the paper. It was a rough sketch of a building surrounded by lush greenery. Inside there were spaces for art workshops, a gallery, and a storytelling nook. "This is brilliant," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But can we really make it happen?" George reached for her hand. "If anyone can, it's us." Building the cultural center was no easy feat. There were permits to secure, materials to source, and the ever-present challenge of funding. Barbara used her connections in Chicago to organize a virtual auction of her paintings, with proceeds going toward the project. George rallied the villagers, who donated their time and skills to bring the vision to life. Despite their efforts, setbacks emerged. The roof leaked during a tropical storm. Delays pushed the opening date back, and tensions ran high as the pressure mounted. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day, Barbara and George found themselves arguing. "You can't do everything yourself, George," Barbara snapped, her frustration boiling over. "And you think you can just throw money at the problem and fix it?" he shot back. The words hung in the air, stinging them both. George ran a hand through his hair, his expression softening. "I'm sorry," he said. "I just want this to work. For us, for the village." Barbara stepped closer, her voice gentler now. "I do too, but we have to lean on each other. We're a team, remember?" He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I'll never forget that." Months later, the Seine Bight Cultural Center opened its doors. The entire village turned out for the celebration, their excitement palpable. The gallery was filled with Barbara's vibrant paintings, while George captivated visitors with his stories of the village's history and culture. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, George led Barbara to a small stage at the center of the festivities. Taking her hand, he smiled at her, his eyes filled with love. "This place wouldn't exist without you," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "You've given us more than art. You've given us hope." Barbara's cheeks flushed as the villagers cheered. But before she could respond, George knelt before her, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. "Barbara," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've brought light and love to this village, and to me. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Barbara's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. 1,000 times yes." The crowd erupted in applause as George slipped the ring, a delicate band adorned with a tiny sapphire, onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into a kiss, as the villagers cheered and the stars began to twinkle above them. The months leading up to Barbara and George's wedding were a flurry of activity, joy, and anticipation. The village of Seine Bight, brimming with excitement, became the heart of the celebration. Everyone wanted to contribute to the big day, offering their skills, food, music, and decorations to honor the couple who had brought so much to their community. Barbara designed the invitations herself, sketching a vibrant scene of the Caribbean Sea meeting the jungle, with 2 mangrove trees intertwined. George coordinated with the villagers, ensuring every detail reflected the culture and beauty of Seine Bight. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the Caribbean sun casting a golden glow over Seine Bight. The ceremony was held on the beach, the waves providing a rhythmic backdrop as the guests gathered. Flowers adorned the sandy isle, and colorful ribbons danced in the breeze, creating a scene straight out of a dream. Barbara stood in her bungalow, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. Her dress was simple yet elegant, a flowing white gown with intricate lace details that resembled the delicate patterns of coral. Her hair was adorned with tiny white flowers, and a sapphire pendant, a gift from George, rested against her collarbone. "You look radiant," said Rosa, one of the villagers who had become a close friend. Barbara smiled, nerves and excitement swirling within her. George stood barefoot on the sand waiting for her. He wore a linen shirt and pants, his usual easygoing charm now tinged with awe as he caught sight of Barbara walking toward him. Her eyes locked with his, and in that moment, everything else faded away. The reception was a joyous celebration of love, life, and community. Tables were laden with traditional Belizean dishes, rice and beans, grilled fish, plantains, and cassava pudding. A local band played lively Garifuna music, and the beach became a dance floor as guests joined in the festivities. Barbara and George shared their first dance as husband and wife beneath a canopy of stars, their laughter mingling with the sound of the waves. When the music slowed, George whispered, "This is the beginning of our forever." Tears glistened in Barbara's eyes as she replied, "I couldn't imagine it with anyone else." As the night wore on, the villagers surprised the couple with a special gift, a carved wooden sculpture of two mangrove trees, their roots intertwined, symbolizing their union and the strength of the community that had brought them together. Love, like art, is about seeing the beauty in what others overlook. In fighting for what they cherished, Barbara and George found not just each other, but a deeper connection to the world around them. And in the quiet village of Seine Bight, they discovered that paradise isn't just a place, it's a feeling, nurtured by the people and passions that make it home. This is the conclusion of Lost in Paradise, a Seine Bight romance story. If you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up. Comment so that I can know your thoughts. Share it with others. And subscribe to my channel for more Caribbean romance stories. This is Irene Pandy Slusher saying don't stress. But as we say in Belize, go slow.